has today's event and what you have heard going to influence the future of Bipolar Commission moving forward in any way?
Of course it will, yeah. I mean, it's all about putting lived experience at the heart of the Commission, and that certainly was, that lived experience was the heart of the conference. So we will certainly be taking a lot of the learning that we've taken from the conference of what people have said to us and making sure that that's included in the Commission itself.
That's
In
right.
the sessions I were at was, I did one on diagnosis that was really good with Leando and Guy, and it was quite apparent that some people are still getting the wrong diagnosis. So that was something that kind of struck me, and clinicians aren't prepared to kind of challenge decisions, or if they don't like decisions being challenged. I think it's important that people get a second opinion.
Yes.
That was something that came out. And also around medication. I mean, Leando had a really good kind of personal take on it about how medication was a bit like wearing a plaster cast, and that once you're better, you take it off and your leg heals and so forth, and you can walk again.
Sure. That's right.
But coming to terms of taking medication for a long time for the rest of your life is a big deal.
Yeah.
Even if you say, oh well, it's the side effects are low, and it's still something that people need to come to terms with. So that was really interesting, that discussion.
Excellent.
And then I particularly liked Nicky Chin talking about when he was diagnosed and the challenges he faced within his family. And I'm sure that case is still quite common now, but
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of progress in that area. I think there's still a lot of stigma and prejudice in society.
That's
but I
right.
think within families, I think people are a lot more understanding, which is a really good thing.
Definitely. And I think when you said society, one thing that came to my mind is especially the way it's portrayed in the media, be it, I don't know, EastEnders or Coronation Street, or in the movies and TV dramas. And I think it seems as if a lot of the public do get their idea of what it is or what they think it is from these inaccurate portrayals of people with bipolar.
I think that's undoubtedly the case. I think it's quite interesting the way that you use performance art, because you kind of externalize that to an extent, don't you?
Yes.
But you're a very calm person. Like, it's amazing, like talking to you, and when you've been involved with the conference,
yes,
you're a very, very calm person. So
right.
Whereas it's like when we talk about people with bipolar and there's kind of very stereotypical portrayals, it tends to be people who've got very erratic behavior and
completely
can be very angry, and actually like people with bipolar are much more likely to be victims of violence than to be perpetrators. We know that most people's experience of bipolar tends to be around depression.
Yes.
And we also know that actually most people with bipolar are self-managing really well, and even when they're manic, they don't really get angry. They might get agitated, but people barely get angry as with bipolar. It does happen. And anger management is something that we work with people on, but it's not the dominant aspect of bipolar, which often gets portrayed.
Definitely. One thing you said that really just took me back to speaking to Leah, and she mentioned about how she had a manager once who was so horrible to her, and she actually realized and found out later that the reason for that behavior towards her was because the manager was also bipolar, and Leah's presence somehow kind of bothered her and triggered her. So the only way she could sort of react to her was to attack her. And it just brings to mind how much people are sort of perhaps misunderstanding it or fighting it off, as if it's a shirt that can be put on and taken off. And just not accepting it. So that leads me to my next question. How do you help or assist the person who may suspect they have it in accepting the situation, in terms of wanting to own it and move on positively?
Well, people with bipolar have existed since the dawn of time, so
Absolutely.
Nothing to be ashamed of, and different cultures that have described it in different terms. We think it is increasing, but it's predominantly a genetic condition, so people carry it with them. so there's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, people talk a lot of bipolar about there's a kind of spark of brilliance, and that's true certainly for some individuals, but it's not worth kind of overemphasizing that, because there's lots of people with bipolar who just lead very normal lives and do very routine jobs, and that's absolutely fine as well. I think the first thing in terms of coming to terms of it, I think diagnosis is really important, because it can give you some route into talking about it with other people. Like of anything in life, like life is about experiences. Experiences in the broader sense are quite chaotic, and it's by kind of researching and use of language that we can kind of categorize them and kind of make sense of them. But so diagnosis is helpful in that respect, because it will be able to help you find other people who have been through what you've been through.
That's right.
There's about one in 50 people have bipolar, but when you ask people, so most people know about the typical social network of most people is about 150 is I understand thereabouts. So most people probably know 3 people with bipolar.
Wow.
But when we ask people when they got their first diagnosis, did they know anyone with bipolar?
Yes.
70% said they didn't know anyone with it. So clearly there's lots of people with bipolar who, for very sensible reasons, aren't telling other people that they got bipolar, or just want to keep it private, which is totally appropriate for them, especially given the level of stigma. So it might be that and also there's lots of people that are undiagnosed, so it might be that Leah's colleague hadn't got a diagnosis yet, and it's stressful having bipolar. So if you don't have no other people have got it, and there's an uncertainty there, or there's a lot of stigma, then if it's hard work living with it, then it's hard work to be around someone else who's got it as well. So you can see how these situations develop, but solidarity amongst people with lived experience is so important. And we know across like so many different like movements that solidarity is the key to success. If you can get a group of people to have a strong solidarity and to have a unity of action, then you can achieve anything.
Absolutely. I think it was Emma that mentioned something really similar to what you just said there. Her joining the group and beginning to listen to stories of others and immediately feeling that sense of comfort. Like she wasn't so strange or so weird or whatever, especially at the beginning stages of her finding out. So I think you're completely spot on. Yes, being part of a group who understands will definitely help. What are some of the plans in helping service providers from your side?
Well, we want to get our services out to more people. So the simple knowledge of self-management is just so vital for people anyway. And there's some people who still don't have it. So we'd love everyone with bipolar to be able to just be aware of us and to be able to use our website once or twice a year when they needed it. So that's a key priority. Our e-community as well, we've got 8,000 members, and we would love to get it up to 20 or 30,000 and 5,000 active users. So we would love to get more people using that service. So I think that's a key priority for us in terms of our service delivery. In terms of other service providers, I would say it's probably, I love people with bipolar to be in control of their care. And at the moment, for a lot of people, they don't get anything. They get really basic stuff, might be able to go and see their GP and so forth, but don't really get access to a psychiatrist. They don't get access to proper support in terms of reviewing their medication. So we would love to be able to put people with bipolar in control by enabling them to have a personal budget, which is officially, it's supposed to be possible. Like people are officially supposed to be able to have a personal budget, but I've never met anyone who's had it from mental health.
Yes.
And then that would mean that they would be able to choose a psychiatrist and be able to we might want to see a psychiatrist once a year, or some people might want to see them once a month. Other people might well want to go to a therapist. That might be what works for them. Other people might not want that. They maybe want to use the money to support their family if they're struggling financially.
True.
It's not the family that provides the emotional support a lot of the time. So it would put people with bipolar in control. And I think if they feel control of their self-management, then that will help with the self-management. So that's those are really important. And also just more specialist services, which hopefully would flow out from that, because there's a tendency with mental health that we talk about in very generic terms, and there's like we will say that, oh well, it's been really difficult during the pandemic, everyone's feeling lonely. We all need to make social connections, and we need more exercise and so forth. And all that stuff's important, and all that stuff benefits people with bipolar. But people with bipolar have very specific, unique needs around medication, around like specialist services, around talking therapies, and in a way that, for example, someone with like mild to moderate depression or someone with schizophrenia doesn't have those needs. I mean, they have needs as well, but they're different needs. So like we need to have the same approach to mental health as we would do physical health. Like you wouldn't expect someone with Parkinson's to have the same treatment as someone with cancer. I mean, it'd be totally different. So we need to have that tailored approach as well.
Definitely. And absolutely. So right, because one of the questions I was going to ask you, and you just brushed up on that, was why does it seem or appear that perhaps the nation or the national press seems to take bipolar not as serious as other, mental health conditions?
Well, it doesn't take it seriously compared to the vast majority of health conditions.
Yeah, it appears that way. Yeah.
I think it comes down to effective lobbying. I mean, I'm take a more cynical view of this. I've worked in some really large charities. So I worked at Alzheimer's Society. I worked there, I did some really amazing work, and I worked at Leonard Cheshire Disability, who do some amazing work. And they will all have really big policy and communications teams. So, for example, at Alzheimer's Society, they put their turnover of their communications team is probably bigger than what our entire charity is. So they would have like 8 or 9 communications officers. They would have a policy team of about 7 or 8. They would have people who were doing basic awareness raising, so doing TV campaigns. And what it means was, and they did a lot of hard work to get to that place. So like all power to them. Like and people with dementia certainly deserve it as well.
That's right.
But it meant that they can then go to government and they just keep that pressure up all the time, saying why it's important. So the big thing for dementia was the prevalence stat. So they would say, they'll get a leading academic and they'll be able to say the number of people with dementia is going to go up by 40% over the next 20 years, and it's going to result in these extra costs in the NHS.
Right.
And for years and years, people ignored them as a charity, but then finally it kind of like hit home, and then government suddenly listened. And I think we need that similar attitude with bipolar. You just need to marshal the statistics, find your allies in departments. And there's lots of really excellent people within NHS England and the devolved administrations and Department of Health. Like lots of people want to do the right thing, but you need to make it as easy for them as possible and to provide the evidence base, and also to provide the campaigning that goes on alongside it to make sure that they feel it's necessary for them to act in that area. Because if they don't, they'll prioritize something else.
So true. Yeah, well said. My next question to you: how are you planning to take your collaboration with Diversity Radio forward, or how would you want to take it forward?
Well, I'd love to do more of these, and it'd be really great. We know bipolar affects everyone, regardless of their ethnicity, their creed, or their background. And we know that as a charity, there's lots of people from different backgrounds that we're not able to reach as well as we could do. I mean, our services are actually pretty representative of the country as a whole. I mean, we don't reach. I mean, there's about 800,000 people to 1 million people with bipolar in the UK, and we probably reach about 100,000 through our website, and through our services we're probably reaching about 2 or 3,000 a month. So we know from evaluation we're pretty representative in terms of our service users, but there's huge gaps. So there's so many like Black British people who are living with bipolar who aren't able to access our services, or British Asian or other ethnic minorities. And we know that Diversity Radio is a really excellent resource for so many people from those different communities. So we would love to be able to work with you to be able to get more and more people from different backgrounds using our services. And we are a diverse charity as well. I mean, we've got an amazing group of people, and it really shows that like diversity does work, because they've got a common cause, they come together and they can achieve amazing things.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things I think that's been running through everybody I've spoken to today, and including hearing other people's stories, like togetherness is so incredibly key here, in raising awareness, raising funds, everything else. Absolutely. In terms of, if we can go back to the sort of national press for a moment, and from your perspective, how would you strategize in getting, greater awareness from the national press?
That's a really good question. So we build up relationships with good journalists who've got an interest in it, and there's lots of journalists who actually, publicly or privately, have a very close connection with bipolar. That's really important.
Yes.
And to be able to provide newsworthy stories. And I think a lot of that is about the stats, but it's also about the people's stories at the end of it. So I understand the Telegraph have got a story about Leah coming out today, which is great. So that was something we were able to work with the journalists at the Telegraph to make happen.
Yes.
So that side of it's really important. And then I think we've got to find a way of being able to hit home with just the kind of the seriousness of the challenge that we face as well. And it's hard to do it in a way, it needs to be done really sensitively, because people with bipolar have a lot of fear of the condition itself. So we don't want to make people unnecessarily worried about having bipolar. But I think we need to make the wider community aware of just the kind of the burden that's been faced by them. So, I mean, when we're using the stat that between 10 and 50% of all suicides are likely related to bipolar.
Wow.
I mean, that's a stat that kind of makes people suddenly listen, and you think, well, I can't. It's a horrendous statistic. When you think that two people, at the very least, 2 people with bipolar are completing suicide every day, and it could be a lot higher than that as well. I mean, that really sharpens minds, and people can understand that's something that needs to be rectified. And then also perhaps just shaming the public around, and the public receives a lot of shaming, but a lot of the changes that we're looking for don't cost a lot of money. Yes. So we talked about lithium. Like I know other treatment areas where people they'll be spending tens of thousands of pounds to extend life by a couple of months, which is important stuff, and those people deserve every extra life that they can get.
Definitely.
But because we don't have the evidence base and the research, I mean, but we can't go to people and say, look, this basically getting everyone with bipolar on lithium would extend X number of people's lives, and that's something that we need to get the evidence base around that, because I'm sure it's possible. We know that a lot of the numbers are there, so we just need to kind of pull them together. So that's an important thing, and just highlighting that it doesn't cost a lot of money, but if it doesn't cost a lot of money, then why aren't we doing it? That's clearly a good example there.
Yes, great question.
Eugene, I'd welcome any advice you've got. I don't know if you have any tips on how we can engage the media in a more engaging way and get them to take this topic more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually, funny enough, had a couple of ideas run through my mind during this whole day, and I'd like to talk to you about it at some point. So I think it could definitely be one way to sort of get more people to pay attention, or to bring attention to the plight of Bipolar UK and everything wonderful that you're doing, really. So we'll definitely have a chat, I'm sure. I've asked this question, the next question, to several people. I just want to see, or just want to know what your wisdom is on this. What will your words of encouragement and wisdom be to those needing to embrace or face the fact that the discovery that they have bipolar?
I'd say that the hardest part is probably behind you. People who get a bipolar diagnosis, it's not something that happens lightly. Like, people have been through a lot themselves before they get to that point. And it's far harder living with bipolar without a diagnosis and having a diagnosis. So I would say that it's like having it finally is a way of opening doors. And it gives people, I think a lot of people say, a sense of release, because people lead very difficult lives and they have very difficult relationships with people, and that a lot of people carry that with them. So they think if they've been like people have had long periods of depression, they've not been able to be the mum or the father they wanted to be to their kids. They've perhaps said stuff when they've been manic, or they've spent lots of money and got their family into debt that they never wanted to, and that sense of shame and guilt, people carry it with them so much. And actually getting a diagnosis is a really effective way of just being able to lift that and to say it's not your fault. Like, what happened is because you had a medical condition.
Absolutely.
You never chose to be in that situation. You're making the best of it, and the fact that you've gone to get a diagnosis is the first step to being able to help those around you. So that'll be my advice. And also that there are some really amazing people with bipolar. Like there's if you go into Wikipedia and you say famous people with bipolar, there's a massive long list of people who you can point to, and you can think, well, like, I would be quite proud of a lot of their achievements. Like, you think about Adam Ann is up there, Mariah Carey.
Yes.
You got Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yes.
Stephen Fry. And I mean, we know there's a lot of these over eggs sometimes that, well, people with bipolar do well in the entertainment industry, but it's equally the case that just that other industries, people with bipolar are also excelling, but because they're not got the high profile, people aren't as interested. Like, people are successful in law, in finance, in medicine, in academia. A lot of them are excellent tradesmen. I mean, people with bipolar are doing amazing things, but they just don't like to talk about it, and they're just shy of their achievements. So I'd say don't let the bipolar hold you back, and just find an effective way of self-managing and just keep on working at it. Like, it's never going to be perfect, but there's lots of things you can do to live well, and with medication and sleep and so forth. And don't give up on the future. The future's got a huge amount to offer you.
Absolutely. I mean, from an artistic perspective, you can imagine that I love the fact that today is Vincent van Gogh's birthday, and that the whole day is sort of, built upon his birthday and his profile and all the other wonderful things that he did. Simon, thank you so much for your time and for your insight. I think it's really super encouraging to see what you've picked up today, where you're going to take it. I look forward to us collaborating in ways to bring more attention to the whole situation. I look forward to talking to you. And a brilliant, huge well done for all your efforts and for raising such huge awareness on everything today.
Thanks, Eugene. I really look forward to working with you with Diversity Radio as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you today as well. Hope you have a really wonderful day.
Thanks.
Thanks. Keep safe.